Okay, so can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. So I'm Jessica Holland. I'm the archivist at the American Center of Research in Amman, Jordan. And I just wanted to highlight that so the center is based in Jordan, but also in Alexandria in Virginia in the US. And for those of you who may be familiar with ACOR, the O from Oriental has been changed this year to OV, change which sounds quite simple, but has been a long time in coming. And this is the first time that ACOR has been represented at MELA, and it's my first time participating as well. And I imagine that perhaps for some of those in the audience, particularly as we're stretched across 13 time zones, that might be the case for you as well. So I'm going to speak briefly about the experience of COVID-19 in Jordan. It had one of the strictest lockdowns in the world starting in March. And as Summer was saying, there was both challenges with that, but also opportunities for cooperation. We also started some new digital collaborations and focused on building and sustaining some online user communities to replace those in-person communities we were more used to serving. And then finally, I'll discuss some lessons learned from the past 6 months. So the COVID-19 response in Jordan really started for us on the 14th of March, when it was announced that a few days later the airport would be closed. This had major ramifications for some of our key users, partly because many ACOR interns, fellows and residents had to suddenly rush to try and find flights home via various different locations in the world. So the airport closed on the 17th of March, and then shortly afterwards, emergency and martial law was announced. This involved sort of weeks of curfew on end, with a time to be sort of indoors by being set by sirens at sunset. And that lasted from March through May, with a driving ban that continued until the end of April. And this meant that travel between regions within the country was heavily restricted, but also travel across neighborhoods within cities was restricted. So there wasn't really even the possibility of walking to the office to pick up something that would have been useful for remote working. Schools were also closed and remained closed until September. And so in general, it was a period of rapid change, which we only had a couple of days notice for. It actually, in some ways, was a major year of change at ACOR already. In the 2 weeks prior to the travel ban and lockdown, Carmen Himi Aibi, ACOR's library director of 32 years, who some of you may recognize, she built up the collection from 3,000 titles when she began in the 1990s to 45,000. And in the same 2-week period, we also gained a new director, Dr. Piers Paul Kriesman. So the question that the ACOR Library and Archives team asked ourselves in this time of rapid change was how we could continue to support users who would usually visit us for in-person research trips or to lead educational tours, when those trips, or even trips across the city to come and use a specialized library, were postponed indefinitely. So one of the saving graces in some ways was that over the past couple of years, ACOR's library has invested in a digital humanities project, the ACOR Photo Archive, which you can see a screen grab from here. So this made it possible for our team to keep building resources for those user communities despite not being able to serve them in person. The ACOR Photo Archive project has digitized, described and shared online photographs from the ACOR's large photographic collections. These photographs depict 11 countries in the region over the past 80 years. And so as you'll be aware, that really records quite significant changes relevant to diverse fields, including cultural heritage, social and political history, and of course, environmental change. This site also compiles for the first time all major transliterations and Arabic script versions of over 200 prominent heritage sites in Jordan, really combining the work of various other sites that exist out there, but all in one place. And this project really took the library from a state of providing access to resources to producing a resource itself. It brought the team into contact with a really wide range of library, archives, and photography conservation experts from around the world. As you can see, some of the photographs here of the team that's been involved on and off for the past 4 years. And this also really activated the latent skills of existing staff members too. And with this increased digital literacy that was a direct result of this photo archive project, ACOR was actually in a much better position to cope with the sudden shift to remote working than it would have been otherwise. That being said, there still were some pretty major challenges to be overcome, and this was the final 6 months of that photo archive project, so we had some concrete goals to meet within that period, not least having 30,000 images online by the end of September 2020. Also, as my, as my colleague Summer indicated, the Wi-Fi situation in Jordan isn't perhaps what it is in other places in the world, in that many people might rely on mobile data within their homes. So that might be absolutely fine for WhatsApp or YouTube, but isn't quite up to the standards of speed and power that would be necessary for work video calls or for handling large amounts of image and metadata. So, and also, of course, being a digitization project, we really required access to the physical photographs. So I'm just going to quickly talk you through this diagram, which basically is how we divided up the digitization and metadata labor into its component parts of slide scanning, photo editing, metadata production, and quality control, and then uploading the photos onto the online platform. And this really involved some impressive collaboration, which one of the key components of was that we had 2 people living within the ACOR building. So that was our project archivist and our associate director. And this meant the project archivist could continue scanning even after the whole country had closed down. And that meant that the other 2 staff members who worked typically in scanning and image editing and color editing could then continue to work basically using access via laptops and Microsoft Remote Desktop. And this resulted in, through the 3-month period from March to the end of May, we had 1,300 images scanned, around 4,500 edited, and overall the quality control system of checking almost 27,000 images. And on the metadata front, I mentioned that our library director had retired in early March. So what we've been able to do then is divide up the tasks that she had been responsible for in terms of metadata. And that led to overall 3,500 images being published online. As we moved from the initial response into sustaining workflows over months, we also rearranged our project timeline to focus on things that could be done remotely. So we had a period of quality control, checking, which we were assuming to do at the end of the project, we sort of did earlier for the previous 3.5 years of data. And this really sent us on our way towards our goal of 30,000 images online by September 2020, which I'm really pleased to say that we met and exceeded slightly. So over the summer, there was no community transfer in Jordan almost. So that meant that we came back to the office again for the period of June to August. And even though we were going through a period of relative normality, we recognized that we needed to really realign our outreach strategies to the account for the fact that the majority of our research communities globally and locally had now moved online. So there'd been a serious shift. So what we did was we prioritized sharing video content about the archive in English and Arabic and experimented with some paid promotions on social media. And this had some really great results, at least for our scale of organization. So we made 2 one-minute clips of an hour-long lecture that had been delivered in February, one of the last events before the lockdown. And that garnered 2,700 views across platforms, like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And at the same time, we wanted to make sure that our Arabic coverage and outreach efforts about the library were as good as they could possibly be. And this meant primarily sharing the video lecture that our assistant librarian, Sami Khalaf Kafafi, had given, which linked the archive as a resource for middle and high school teaching directly with the Jordanian curriculum. And this, again, we tried to time it with the back to school movement. And that became even more pertinent as schools have now gone to 100% remote learning again in the beginning of October. So the second part of what I'd like to speak about today is the new digital collaboration that we started during this period. So one of ACOR's other projects is the USAID SCHEP project. So SCHEP being Sustainable Cultural Heritage Through the Engagement of Local Communities project. And it usually supports best practices in the field of heritage preservation and sustainable development, which require more hands-on activities. And typically speaking, the library and archives don't have a lot of crossover with this project. However, because SCHEP's activities were so restricted due to the closed archaeological sites, few international local visitors, because if you remember, the airport's closed and people have limited travel within the country, this meant that there was this moment of coming together. So we could help SCHEP in archiving their born digital collections, and that meant we were also able to have a learning experience ourselves. Because this was an opportunity to link our archival skills with the skills both in sustainable development, modern conservation practices, and also a greater Arabic speaking staff, so that we could produce ACOR's first bilingual metadata description project. And this was also produced the opportunity to contrast photos all on the same site from the 1940s with those from up to 2018. So really showing the full histories of these sites and how they've been presented and handled in the past. And thirdly, I mentioned that we had really experienced the benefit of building our online user communities as well. So the ACOR Photo Archive project had originally led ACOR to be more immersed in the local open access efforts. And that includes organizations such as the Jordan Open Source Association and Wikimedia Levant. So we had previously hosted an in-person editathon with those two groups focused on Jordanian heritage in October of 2019, as you can see from the group photo here. And this was really well attended. We wanted to keep the momentum going. So we created a Facebook group so that people could share translation ideas or questions. And this was monitored by some of our ACOR interns, including special volunteers that were related to Wikipedia. So they were part of the Wikimedians in Residence program. And unfortunately, one of those interns had to be repatriated back in March. But because we had this network through that Facebook group, in June, my colleague Jackie Saltzinger was able to utilize that network and partner with the ACOR intern now based in the States to actually run a 24-hour editathon, again, focusing on increasing the amount of content in English and Arabic and making use of ACOR Library and Photo Archive resources. And if you're interested in this topic at all, we actually have the next in the series coming up this Saturday, and they'll be focusing specifically on Jordanian academics and increasing the number of pages relating to prominent figures from Jordan in English and Arabic versions of Wikipedia. So please do join us.
So Jessica, you've got about 3 minutes.
Okay, perfect, thanks. And so just to reflect slightly on the lessons learned from the past 6 months. So before the effects of the pandemic hit, the Photo Archive and the Wikipedia outreach efforts were valued, I would say, by the organization, but perhaps not treated as core activities for the institution. And I think something that's really shifted in that area is this idea that these are not sort of fashionable add-ons to library services, and in fact are more and more so part of that combined core activities of the library and archives. These secondary digital projects became the primary methods in which we could continue to build and provide resources of value to our user communities, and ultimately also actively engage them through the sort of working together on a project like the Wikipedia example. And although I'm brand new to MELA as a participant and attendee, this whole experience has really convinced me of the immense value of MELA as a support system of global reach, because ultimately, of course, we always have so much to learn from one another. But I think now more than ever, this transfer of knowledge and advice between professionals across the field has really become a lifeline. So thank you very much. And please do feel free to contact me if you have any questions. I'm going to share some contact details on the next slide. And I just thought I'd include this photo here on the right. as a sort of teaching moment with Peninsula having a teaching moment with some Madaba Mosaic School students back in 1995. So yes, here are the various links, and this is for our database. More interpretive articles about the collections, and of course some email addresses. So thank you very much, and I'd like to pass on to Samuel.